Cato sat by the towering baobab tree at the edge of the bustling marketplace, his tattered robes fluttering in the warm breeze. His hair, silver like the moon, framed a face carved by time and wisdom. To the villagers, he was nothing more than an old fool, a man whose mind had been lost to the winds. They laughed at his riddles, dismissed his warnings, and called him mad. But Cato never wavered. "Gold sleeps where no man dares to dream," he would say. "A river runs where no water flows. The treasure you seek is hidden in plain sight." The children would giggle, repeating his words in jest. The merchants would shake their heads, whispering about the madman who had once been something more, though few remembered what. The king, seated high on his golden throne, had heard of Cato's ramblings but cared little for the nonsense of a beggar. The kingdom was vast and prosperous, built on the riches of its ancestors. Legend spoke of a hidden treasure, a wealth beyond imagination, locked away centuries ago by the first king. Many had searched for it, but none had ever succeeded. The passage of time turned the legend into myth, a mere tale to entertain restless children. Yet Cato spoke with certainty. His voice carried the weight of one who knew more than he let on. "A crown without a king, a door without a key," he murmured to anyone who would listen. "It waits." One evening, as the marketplace quieted and the sun dipped below the horizon, a young warrior named Jabari paused to listen. Unlike the others, he did not laugh. He studied Cato with curious eyes. Could there be truth behind the old man's words? What if the kingdom had been blind to its greatest fortune? The whispers of treasure had long enticed dreamers and fools alike, but none had ever thought to truly listen to Cato. If he was mad, then he was a madman with purpose. If he was wise, then the kingdom had overlooked its greatest guide. What if Cato wasn't a fool at all, but the only one who held the key to unlocking the kingdom's most extraordinary secret? Jabari crouched beside the flickering fire, his dark eyes locked onto Cato's weathered face. The old man sat cross-legged, his bony fingers tracing patterns in the dirt as he spoke in a hushed, almost reverent tone. "The winds whisper to those who listen," Cato murmured. "The treasure is not merely gold, it is power. It can heal the land or burn it to ashes. The choice belongs to the one who finds it." Jabari shivered despite the warmth of the flames. The kingdom had fallen into a cruel cycle of suffering. The rivers had dried, the crops withered, and hunger clawed at the people's bellies. The once great land was crumbling, and even the king's advisors had no answers. Drought had turned the villagers desperate, their hope fading like the morning mist. Rumors swirled through the streets like dry leaves in the wind. Some said the gods had turned their backs on them. Others claimed an ancient curse had awakened. But the most persistent whisper was of the lost treasure, the one that could save them all. Yet no one dared believe in Cato. "Why do you tell me this?" Jabari asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He was just an orphan, a boy without a name worth remembering. Cato turned to him, his eyes gleaming like embers. "Because only those who have nothing to lose dare to seek the truth." Jabari had spent his life scraping by, ignored by the nobles, overlooked by the villagers. But now he felt something stir within him, a quiet, uncertain hope. What if Cato was right? What if the treasure wasn't just a legend? He had seen how the people sneered at Cato, how they dismissed his riddles. But he had also seen the way the old man's gaze lingered on the palace, the way his words carried weight beneath their cryptic nature. The prophecy was clear. The treasure lies where shadows bow. A golden heart beneath the vow. One will seek and one will see. But only truth shall turn the key. Jabari could not shake the feeling that Cato was not just speaking in riddles, he was warning him. The treasure was real, but its power could bring either salvation or destruction. Could he trust a man the world had forsaken? Could he risk believing in something greater than himself? Jabari trailed behind Cato, his bare feet brushing against the damp jungle floor. The thick canopy above filtered the moonlight, casting eerie shadows that swayed like silent watchers. Crickets sang their nighttime melody, but beneath their chorus, Jabari could hear the steady crunch of Cato's footsteps leading deeper into the unknown. "Cato, where are we going?" Jabari finally asked, his voice hushed. "To the truth," the old man replied. "The treasure is not found by those who seek riches. It reveals itself to those who seek understanding." Jabari frowned. He was growing used to Cato's riddles, but this time, something about his words made the hair on the back of his neck rise. The jungle was alive with whispers, rustling leaves, and distant calls of unseen creatures. After what felt like hours, they arrived at a clearing where a massive stone slab stood, covered in twisting vines. Cato approached it with reverence, brushing his gnarled fingers over the rough surface. With a deep breath, he pulled a small blade from his belt and sliced his palm. "The stone only speaks when offered truth," he murmured, pressing his bleeding hand against the rock. Jabari gasped as golden symbols flared to life across the stone, glowing like fireflies in the darkness. He stepped closer, tracing the ancient carvings with wide eyes. "What does it say?" he asked, his heart pounding. Cato smiled, but it wasn't a smile of joy, it was a knowing, almost sorrowful expression. "It speaks of the 3 trials," he said. Jabari swallowed hard. He had heard of trials and stories, of heroes facing impossible challenges to claim their destinies. But those were just tales, weren't they? Cato pointed to the first inscription. "The Cave of Echoes, where silence is death and only the brave may speak." He then gestured to the next carving. "The River of Shadows, a path unseen, where the past seeks to drown the unworthy." Finally, his finger hovered over the last symbol. "The Guardian's Wrath, a test of heart, where the greatest enemy is oneself." Jabari exhaled slowly. Each trial sounded more dangerous than the last. But the kingdom was starving, the rivers had dried, and the people had given up hope. If this treasure could change their fate, he had to try. He looked up at Cato. "Have you ever attempted the trials?" Cato chuckled, the sound both warm and sad. "I have lived long enough to know that some treasures are not meant for my hands." Jabari clenched his fists. He was no warrior, no noble son, but something in his chest burned with determination. "What if I fail?" he asked. Cato turned to him, his dark eyes glinting in the golden light of the carvings. "Treasure is never truly lost, only hidden from those unworthy," he said. "The question is, do you believe you are worthy?" Jabari took a deep breath. He didn't know if he was worthy, but he was ready to find out. Jabari tightened his fists, staring at the ominous mouth of the cave before him. The Cave of Echoes loomed like the gaping maw of a great beast, its entrance swallowed in darkness. A chilling wind whispered from within, carrying distant voices, voices that sent shivers down his spine. Cato stood behind him, his face unreadable. "Remember, boy, this cave does not test your body, it tests your mind. If you listen to the wrong voices, you will never find your way out." Jabari swallowed hard. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. The moment he crossed the threshold, the darkness became absolute. He reached out, his hands brushing against damp stone walls, but there was no light, no guide, only the whispers. "You are not worthy. You will fail just like the others. Your people mock you. They do not believe in you." The voices grew louder, overlapping, filling his mind with doubt. He squeezed his eyes shut, willing himself forward. His mother's face appeared in his mind, the hunger in her eyes, the desperation in the village. No, he couldn't fail. He wouldn't. Then a different voice, his own, whispered from within. "Trust yourself." Jabari's eyes snapped open. The whispers were a trick. He steadied his breath, moving forward without hesitation. The voices clawed at him, but he ignored them. With every step, they grew fainter until at last he emerged into the light. Cato was waiting, a proud glint in his eye. "You hear many voices in this world, boy, but the only one that truly matters is your own." Jabari barely had time to catch his breath before they reached the second trial. The River of Shadows. The water was black as ink, swirling with strange reflections. The current was deceptively calm, but Cato warned him, "This river does not pull you under with force, it drowns you in fear." Jabari stepped in. Instantly, the water shifted and a vision rose before him. His mother, frail and starving, reaching for him. "You left us," she cried. "You abandoned your people." "No," Jabari whispered, his heart pounding. "I'm doing this for you." The water churned, showing him another vision. Himself, lost in the jungle, alone, forgotten. His reflection smirked. "You think you're a hero? You're just a foolish child chasing myths." Jabari clenched his jaw. These fears, they were real. But fear was only an illusion, a shadow that passed if one had the courage to walk through it. With steady steps he waded forward. The water clawed at him, but he kept moving. The moment he reached the other side, the visions vanished. Cato nodded approvingly. "Fear binds those who let it. But you did not." Jabari barely had time to breathe before the third and final test. The Guardian's Wrath. A colossal stone figure stood at the heart of a clearing, its eyes glowing like molten gold. The ground trembled as it came to life, towering over Jabari. Cato's voice echoed behind him, "Strength will not defeat it. Cunning will not outweed it. Only truth can tame it." The Guardian raised its fist, ready to strike. Jabari braced himself, but instead of running or fighting he took a deep breath. He stepped forward, meeting the guardian's gaze with unshaken resolve. "I do not seek treasure for greed," he said. "I seek it for my people. I do not wish for power, I wish for salvation." The guardian's glowing eyes flickered. Its raised fist froze. Then, slowly it lowered its arm. The ground stilled. Jabari exhaled. He had passed. Cato stepped beside him, smiling for the first time. "You were never facing the guardian's wrath, boy." He placed a hand over Jabari's heart. "You were facing your own." The trials were over. Jabari was ready for the treasure's secret. Jabari stepped forward, his breath shallow as he entered the final chamber. The air was thick with the scent of earth and age, the walls carved with ancient symbols that pulsed faintly in the dim light. His heart pounded. After all the trials, after facing his fears, this was it, the kingdom's greatest treasure. At the center of the chamber, resting upon an intricately carved pedestal, was not a mound of gold, nor a chest brimming with jewels. Instead there sat a single golden chalice. Jabari's brow furrowed. He had expected riches beyond imagination, something that would change the fate of the kingdom in a way that even the most skeptical would believe. But this? A simple cup? Cato stepped beside him, his old, weathered hands brushing across the ancient carvings on the walls. His voice was calm, measured. "Is this not what you expected, boy?" Jabari swallowed, hesitant. I thought it would be more. Something grand." Cato chuckled softly. "You still have much to learn about what true treasure is." The old man reached for the chalice, lifting it carefully as if holding the weight of centuries in his hands. A soft glow radiated from the cup, and as he tilted it slightly, a single drop of water spilled onto the dry stone floor. The moment the droplet touched the ground, a miracle happened. Green tendrils of life sprouted instantly, weaving through the cracks in the stone, blooming into lush, vibrant vines. Jabari gasped, his eyes widening as golden flowers unfolded before him, filling the air with a fragrance that spoke of renewal. "This," Cato said, holding up the chalice, "is the true treasure of the kingdom. The water of life." Jabari reached out, his fingers brushing the cool, smooth surface of the cup. He could feel a pulse within it as though the chalice itself was alive. It can restore the land?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Cato nodded. "Long ago the kings of this land were entrusted with its power. They were meant to use it wisely, to ensure balance between the earth and its people. But greed," he sighed, "greed is a disease more deadly than drought." Jabari listened intently as Cato spoke of the past, of kings who hoarded the chalice's power, using it only to enrich themselves while the land withered. When the earth rebelled, the chalice was hidden away, lost to time, waiting for one worthy to wield it again. Jabari felt the weight of destiny pressing upon him. His mind raced with possibilities. With this chalice he could return to the kingdom as a hero. He could be powerful, respected. No one would call him a foolish orphan ever again. But then he thought of his people, the dry fields, the empty wells, the children with hollow eyes. He turned to Cato, his grip on the chalice tightening. "What happens if I take it for myself?" Cato's expression darkened. "Then the land will remain cursed. The suffering will not end." He placed a hand on Jabari's shoulder. "A treasure's worth is not in possessing it, but in how it is used." Jabari closed his eyes. His journey had never been about riches. It had never been about proving himself to those who had scorned him. It had been about something far greater. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. "Then let's return it," he said. "Let's save the kingdom." For the first time, Cato smiled, a knowing gleam in his eyes. "You have chosen well." Jabari barely had time to react before a shadow moved behind them. The faint torchlight flickered, casting a long silhouette against the cavern walls. A sharp voice cut through the air. Well, the voice sneered. "What do we have here?" Jabari turned swiftly, his grip tightening around the golden chalice. A tall, imposing man in ornate robes stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with greed. Lord Mzuri, one of the kingdom's most powerful nobles. He had secretly followed them through the jungle, lurking in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to strike. Cato's expression darkened. "You should not be here." Mzuri smirked, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. "And yet here I am. Do you truly believe I would let a foolish boy and a raving old man lay claim to the kingdom's greatest treasure?" Jabari's heart pounded. "This treasure isn't what you think," he said cautiously. Mzuri's gaze fell upon the chalice, his fingers twitching with impatience. "That chalice belongs to me now." Cato stepped in front of Jabari, raising a warning hand. You do not understand its power. Power is meant to be taken, not understood, Mzuri snapped. In a flash, he unsheathed his sword and lunged. Jabari shouted as Mzuri's blade slashed across Kato's side. The old man staggered, clutching his wound, his face contorted in pain. A cold rage burned inside Jabari. He had trained for this moment, through the cave of echoes, the river of shadows, and the guardian's wrath. He had learned that strength was not in force but in wisdom. Mzuri smirked, pointing his blade at Jabari. Give me the chalice, boy. You don't understand its worth. Jabari steadied his breath. And you do, he challenged. You don't even know what it is. Mzuri faltered for a split second. That was all Jabari needed. Using the agility he had honed through the trials, he dodged to the side, causing Mzuri's strike to miss. As the noble turned, Jabari threw a handful of dust from the cavern floor into his eyes. Mzuri cursed, blinded. Seizing the moment, Jabari darted behind him and kicked the sword from his grasp. The blade clattered to the ground. Mzuri lunged for it, but Jabari was faster. He snatched up the weapon and pointed it at the noble. Stay down, Jabari commanded, his voice firm. Mzuri glared, seething. You think you've won? Kato, still clutching his wound, let out a pained chuckle. You never stood a chance. The noble's sneer faltered. You are not just some madman, are you? Kato sighed. No, I am not. He straightened as best as he could, his once feeble posture transforming into something regal. Long ago, I was the kingdom's greatest scholar, the king's most trusted advisor. But greed poisoned the court. I tried to warn them that true power lay in wisdom, not gold. For that, I was betrayed, cast aside, labeled a madman. Mzuri's face twisted in shock. You are. Yes, Kato interrupted. I was once the keeper of this knowledge. And I have waited all these years for someone who could truly understand what this chalice represents. He turned to Jabari, his eyes filled with pride. And that person is you. Jabari swallowed hard. He had come so far, learned so much. He knew now that power was not something to hoard, it was something to protect, to use for the good of all. Stepping past Mzuri, he held the chalice high. We are returning this to the king. Mzuri slumped in defeat, his greed his undoing. As Jabari helped Kato to his feet, the old scholar smiled weakly. You have done well, my boy. And together they began their journey back, toward justice, toward redemption, and toward a future where wisdom, not wealth, would guide the kingdom. Jabari's heart pounded as he stepped into the grand hall of the royal palace, the golden chalice cradled carefully in his hands. The chamber was filled with nobles, advisors, and villagers who had gathered to witness his return. At the far end of the hall, seated upon his gilded throne, was the king, an aging ruler with weary eyes that had seen years of hardship. The murmurs among the crowd grew louder as they took in the sight before them. The so-called madman, Kato, stood beside Jabari, his once ragged form now carrying the quiet dignity of a man who had been wronged but never broken. Jabari took a deep breath and knelt before the king, lifting the chalice. Your Majesty, he said, his voice steady. The treasure of the kingdom was never gold or jewels. It was this, the sacred water of life. A hushed silence fell over the room. The king narrowed his eyes at the chalice, skepticism written across his face. And why should I believe the word of a boy and a disgraced elder? Jabari did not waver. He turned and gestured toward the great doors of the palace. Let the land decide. The king hesitated, then gave a slow nod. At his command, the palace guard stepped forward, opening the doors to reveal the parched fields outside. The once thriving kingdom had suffered under the weight of drought and despair for far too long. With careful hands, Jabari tilted the chalice, allowing a single drop of water to fall onto the cracked earth. The moment it touched the ground, a ripple of energy surged outward. The dry soil darkened, absorbing the sacred water. A hush swept through the crowd as, before their very eyes, the earth began to tremble, not with destruction but with life. A single green shoot pushed through the barren ground, then another. Within moments, the entire landscape transformed. Lush grass spread like wildfire, trees regained their vibrant green leaves, and a fresh, cool breeze swept through the kingdom. Dark clouds gathered above, and with a mighty crack of thunder, the long-awaited rain began to pour. Gasps and cries of joy erupted from the people. Farmers fell to their knees, pressing their hands into the rejuvenated soil. Children danced in the rain, their laughter echoing through the palace courtyard. The king rose from his throne, his expression one of disbelief and awe. He descended the steps slowly, stopping before Kato. All these years, I dismissed you as a fool. His voice trembled with regret. but you were right all along. Cato bowed his head. The truth is often ignored when it does not suit those in power. The king turned to Jabari. And you, boy, you have done what no one else could. You saw wisdom where others saw madness. You followed the path of truth even when it led you into danger. He took Jabari's hand and raised it high. From this day forward, you will be known as the keeper of the chalice, protector of this land. The crowd erupted in cheers. The same people who had once mocked Cato now celebrated his wisdom. The same ones who had doubted Jabari now looked upon him with admiration. But when Jabari turned to speak to Cato, the old man was no longer there. He had slipped away into the rain, his purpose fulfilled. Legends say that he became one with the land he had fought so hard to save, his spirit forever watching over the kingdom. And as Jabari stepped into his new role, he knew one thing for certain. Wisdom, once ignored, would never be forgotten again. Jabari stood at the edge of the palace balcony, gazing over the lush, rejuvenated kingdom that stretched before him. The once parched land now thrived with rolling green fields, rivers that shimmered under the golden sun, and people whose laughter echoed through the bustling streets. The rain had come, the famine had ended, and the kingdom had been given a second chance. Yet, despite all the celebrations, Jabari's thoughts lingered on one man, the one who had made it all possible. Cato had vanished after the chalice had done its work, disappearing into legend as silently as he had lived. His absence left a weight on Jabari's heart, not of sorrow but of understanding. Some souls were never meant to be confined by palaces or titles. Cato belonged to the winds, to the whispers of the rivers, to the wisdom of the ancients. Stories of him spread across the land like wildfire. The villagers who had once mocked him now spoke his name with reverence. Parents told their children tales of the madman who wasn't mad at all, the guardian of wisdom who had walked among them in tattered robes while holding the key to the kingdom's greatest treasure. But what truly was treasure? Jabari often pondered this question as he grew into his new role. The title of Keeper of the Chalice was an honor, but it was also a responsibility. Gold and jewels could be stolen, riches could be hoarded and fought over, but wisdom, true wisdom, was a gift that could not be taken away. The lesson of time. Years passed, and the kingdom flourished under Jabari's guidance. He did not seek power but instead served as a bridge between the rulers and the people. He traveled through villages listening to farmers, artisans and elders, collecting their stories, their struggles and their hopes. He ensured that the sacred water was never abused, keeping Cato's warning close to his heart. Many nobles had wanted to keep the chalice hidden away in the palace, to be used only for those of royal blood. But Jabari refused. This treasure is not meant for the privileged, he declared. It belongs to the land, to the people. If we hoard it, we are no better than those who doomed the kingdom before us. And so, the chalice was brought to the people. Healers used its water sparingly to cure the sick. The driest lands received its blessing to grow food for the hungry. The kingdom learned balance, never taking more than was needed, never allowing greed to tip the scales of fortune. And as the people prospered, they never forgot the man who had shown them the way. Statues of Cato were carved in town squares, not in gold or marble but in simple stone, strong, enduring, unyielding, just like the truth he had carried all his life. The dangers of judgment. As Jabari grew wiser, he realized just how quickly people judged without understanding. They had called Cato a fool because his wisdom did not fit their expectations. They had doubted Jabari because he was young and unknown. They had nearly doomed themselves because they refused to see beyond their own fears. One day, a young girl approached Jabari in the palace gardens. She was barefoot, her clothes simple but clean, her eyes filled with curiosity. "Keeper," she asked, "why did the people call Cato mad when he was so wise?" Jabari smiled, kneeling so they were at eye level. "Because people fear what they do not understand," he said gently. "It is easier to laugh at something than to question why it exists." They saw his ragged clothes, his strange words, and they assumed he had nothing to offer. But wisdom does not always come in the form we expect. The girl frowned. "Then how do we know who to listen to?" Jabari's smile deepened. "By listening with more than just our ears. We must listen with our hearts, with patience, with the willingness to learn rather than to judge." The girl nodded, her small hands clutching a carved wooden figure of Cato. Even the youngest of the kingdom had come to know his name. A legacy that endures. As the years passed, Jabari became a legend in his own right. Not as a warrior, nor as a ruler, but as a protector of wisdom. He trained scholars, taught children the lessons he had learned, and ensured that knowledge was never hoarded, never hidden away behind palace walls. When the time came for a new generation to take up the role of keeper, Jabari did not hesitate. He passed the chalice on just as Cato had passed his wisdom to him. For true leadership was not about holding power forever, it was about knowing when to let go, when to trust, when to step aside so others could rise. On the day of his departure, Jabari walked alone to the edge of the kingdom, where the rivers met the forests. He stood there for a long time, listening to the wind rustling through the trees, feeling the warmth of the sun on his skin. And in that quiet moment he heard it, a familiar voice carried on the breeze. "You have done well, my boy." Jabari closed his eyes, a peaceful smile gracing his lips. Cato had never truly left. The final truth, a deeper understanding. For centuries, people had fought wars over gold, spilled blood over thrones, and built empires on the pursuit of material wealth. Yet, time and time again, kingdoms had risen and fallen, treasures had been stolen and lost, and those who sought riches found themselves empty-handed in the end. Cato had understood this truth long before anyone else. That is why he had never chased gold, never hoarded jewels, and never sought a throne of power. He had spent his life searching for something far greater, wisdom. When Jabari finally grasped the true meaning of the treasure, he realized that what the people of the kingdom had been searching for had been within their reach all along. The chalice, though powerful, was only a tool, a reflection of something much deeper. It was not the water inside it that had the power to change the kingdom, but the knowledge of how to use it wisely. Knowledge is a treasure greater than gold. Gold can be spent, stolen, or lost. But knowledge, once gained, can never be taken away. A man who possesses wisdom can rebuild from nothing, turn drought into abundance, and transform a broken kingdom into a thriving one. The true treasure of the kingdom had never been a physical object. It had been the forgotten wisdom of the past. It had been hidden not in a chest or deep within a cave, but in the words of a man whom others had dismissed as a fool. How many times had Cato tried to tell them? How many times had they laughed at him, blind to the truth he carried? The power of perspective. It was not just about knowledge, but about the ability to see beyond what others refused to believe. The people of the kingdom had convinced themselves that treasure could only be measured in gold and silver. They refused to believe that wisdom, the thing they had ignored for so long, was the key to their survival. Jabari understood now, true wealth lies in perspective. A wise man can look at an empty field and see a future harvest. A fool, blinded by greed, will only see barren land and walk away. The difference between prosperity and ruin was not fate nor luck. It was the ability to see potential where others saw nothing. A lesson for the future. As Jabari's name became legend, so too did the lesson he carried forward. Do not dismiss what you do not understand. Many had called Cato a madman because they could not see the wisdom behind his words. How many other voices had been silenced throughout history because people refused to listen? Seek truth even when it is hidden.